Last weekend, I went 4-0 at Warhammer World. I got gold. I got a pretty fancy medal for it. Really happy with this. It was a 34-man event. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be looking at the top lists from that event, doing a breakdown of the missions that we played, looking at the event composition, and we're going to be seeing what we can see about the meta as it develops going into the new year. Something I do want to say, though, is that I sat down with the guys after the event and we had a good old chinwag in Bugman's Bar. I did some recording for that. I'm going to put the link for that up there. You guys can check it out. It's a lot of fun. Let's go check out Tangled Nullwood 2 at Warhammer World, February 2025. Okay, everybody, we did it. We absolutely smashed it last year. We hit that 3,000 subscriber goal. Let's do it again this year. We're going for 5K. All you need to do is like and subscribe. And in fact, no, you don't need to subscribe. What I would like you to do now, after you finish watching this video, I've got a massive playlist of all sorts of things Warcry. Check out one of those videos and see if that's what you like. But if you want to throw some more support my way, you can join me here as a member. You can join me over on Patreon. You can join my Discord. Links for that are going to be down in the description below. Either way, you get to see stuff before it's released. You get to have a say into the kind of content that I create in the future. That's it from me for now. Let's get back to the video. Okay, first thing that I want to talk about are the events. We are playing the Ferocious Nullwood 2-pack. We've been playing this at Warhammer World since, I want to say, June, July. I think I've played personally 3 events with these missions, plus an additional one when I went up to Tabletop Scotland. We played a bunch of missions from it there, and I think we may have played one of these missions in Southampton. So they are well trodden by now. But the missions that we did play were Endless Struggle, Lightning Raid, Race to the Ground, and Brutal Encounter. I'm going to put a link to the pack down below so that you can check it out yourself. In short, we had 2 kill missions and we had 2 objective missions. The interesting thing about the Tangled Nullwoods 2-pack, not Tangled, I keep saying Tangled, the Ferocious Nullwood 2-pack, is that all of the missions, they've got primaries, they've got secondaries, and they have a twist. And the twist is kind of meant to be a backup mechanic. Not a backup mechanic, a catch-up mechanic to help you if you are behind. The 2 kill missions, the way you score your points in the 2 kill missions, Endless Struggle and Brutal Encounter, we're going to get 1 point if we killed an enemy fighter. We're going to get 1 point if we killed more fighters than our opponent. We're going to get 1 more point if we killed an enemy hero, thrall, or monster. That additional point is cumulative, so it carries on through the grounds. I did say that there were secondaries to these missions. Brutal Encounter, we are looking at table quarters, and you basically have to have more fighters in the table quarter than your opponent. If you manage to do that, you get 2 points. And Endless Struggle, there are basically shrines that you've got to go and capture, and those shrines will turn on, and the person who's losing gets to choose which shrines turn on during the game. Then you're going to get additional points for capturing those shrines at the end of each battle round. The 2 objective missions, Lightning Raid and Race to the Ground, basically a whole bunch of objective missions. You get a point if you control 1 objective, you get a point if you control more than your opponent, and you get 1 if you control 2. The secondaries are going to be kill secondaries, as opposed to the objective secondaries, you just have to kill your opponent's models. We've trodden this ground fairly regularly before. We've done a whole bunch of events like this. I hope that Games Workshop is cooking up something a little bit different, because you can't just have 1 mission pack that you continue to run event over event over event. Otherwise, it gets a bit boring, it gets a bit stale. I believe these 4 missions that we played were the exact same missions that we played at Warhammer World back in November. There are 6 missions in the mission pack, so they could pick some of the other ones, but generally, I think the other 2 are Mystic Glade, and there is 1 more that I can't remember. The other 2, I don't think are as good as these 4 missions. Hopefully next time, we're going to have something new to talk about. Right, here I've got for you the participants and the average tournament points that they got. Ruination Chamber and Untamed Beasts managed to get a lot of participants during this. I say a lot. They managed to go 4 participants apiece. Ruination Chamber, I think that's because they are one of the new Stormcast factions. They came out in the September update along with a whole bunch of Skaven updates. So that's really exciting to see them. They've had some decent success in this. We're going to go over some of the lists a little bit later on. I'm really glad that Ruination Chamber are up there and that they're doing things. Untamed Beasts. Now, the interesting thing about Untamed Beasts is that they are very rarely played. And if you look back at all of the other lists and events that I've covered, there's barely any Untamed Beasts there. So the question is, why have they suddenly started showing up in significant, well, I mean, only 4, but significant numbers. I put that down to Wargames on Toast. He's been doing a series, Road to Gold, where he's chosen to take Untamed Beast to this event. We were following him as he builds his list, as he plays his games, changes his list week on week. And I think he must have had an influence, and people have decided to dust out their Untamed Beast lists. Some did better than others, but I believe 2 of them were in top 9. So that's very encouraging to see that Untamed Beasts can, despite being an older warband, if you build them in the right way and you try and build them a bit more smartly than just a one-box warband, they can do okay. A very interesting thing here is the almost complete lack of death warbands. I think there's just the one. Yeah, there's one Royal Beastslayer warband, whereas normally the biggest numbers that we'll see basically almost across the board will come from Soulblight Gravelords. That's fallen through the floor completely. There were no Soulblight Gravelords players. We had a few Nighthaunt players last time. They're not here. It's only Royal Beast players. So I don't know if that's because Warcry is one of those games where it's very easy to build and paint a warband for your next event. You can mix and match and dip in and out of different warbands. We just happen to be at a time where Soulblight Gravelords aren't as popular anymore. I know there are a couple of high-profile Soulblight Gravelords players who didn't manage to make it to this event, so maybe that's a part of it. A contributing factor might also be that Soulblight Gravelords did get hit in both the April and September updates. Their chaff got a lot more expensive, and in September they cleaned out some of those old Soulblight Underworlds warbands, basically bringing everything across the board so that they don't just have super ultra cheap fighters that they can bring whatever they want and still put 14, 15 fighters on the table. I don't know what the real reason is. Maybe it's just people wanting to try out new things. That might just be the case. You can see it here. The one guy who brought Tarantulos Brood, this guy managed to win the thing, went 4-0. Well done, me. Corvus Cabal, we're going to cover Corvus Cabal, but again, we rarely see Corvus Cabal at these events. And again, Wargames on Toast keeps on talking about Corvus Cabal, how they're amazing, how with the battle trait they got very, very good. You can bring multiple strike talons, they can jump off of things. And in a Warhammer World event, where we know there's going to be a lot of terrain, you can make a pretty safe bet that if you're bringing Corvus Cabal, you're going to get use out of their triple, and you're going to get use out of their strike talents. So that's something that's very interesting. We're seeing a lot of bespoke warbands turning up, doing reasonably well, and the other warbands that you might otherwise think would do well, things like Caradron Overlords, they're not doing amazingly. So yeah, it's very interesting to see from this. Do I think this is indicative of some kind of new direction, a new meta we're going into? Not really. I think that Warhammer World is one of those special cases where you get a lot of players go, and they just basically want to go, they want to play Warcry, they want to have a fun time, and it's a chance to show off their warbands and show off what they're doing and a whole bunch of different things. So yeah, I think that's really what's happened here, but we'll see if it's a trend that continues on for the future. Looking at the final standings, I've got them up here for you. Tarantulos Brood at the top. Yes, we won all 4 games. However, very low kill points. I did not manage to kill all that many things. You compare and contrast that with Skaven, who are doing very well, with the Ruination Chamber. Ross did very well. I'm very lightly scoring games in comparison to some of these other players. I think it was very tight to get up there. But let's take a look at the lists. We're going to look at all of the 3 and 1 or higher placings. If you want to see all the lists from this event, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to put them all into an article form. You can check that out on offmetamusings.com. I'm going to put the link to that down in the description below, and you can see every one of these lists and all these placings to see how they did. All right, so let's go into top 3. First place, Tarantulos Brood. Second place, Skaven. Third place was Ruination Chamber. If you want to see how I build and play Tarantulos Brood, I've done a fairly extensive video on that. The link is going up there. You can check that out. For the abridged version, though, basically we're bringing 15 guys. Activation economy is one of the strongest things that you can have in the game, because if you have activation advantage, you can dictate where the game goes and how it's played. Another very strong thing to have in the game is Resurrect. Tarantulos Brood have that in the Broodmaster, and in their battle trait they get to use once per game. Free activations are another very strong thing that you can do. They have that also. The Broodmaster and the 2 Doomweavers, they can give spiders additional activations. So between all of that, you have a very good recipe to try and win an event. Now, This pack that we play is slightly, I want to say slightly, I don't think that bigger warbands have a massive advantage, but there is an advantage to having a couple more guys because of the nature of the primaries and the secondaries. There is a slight advantage to bigger warbands. Despite that advantage, and despite the resurrect and the massive warband that I'm bringing, I still had problems in my games. You can see that the scoring was generally pretty low. All of my games were extremely tight between me and my opponents. Game 3, I played against Skaven. That was basically lost, almost lost by my opponent, because he decided to walk Skabic in the opposite direction to where the fight was going to be on turns 3 and 4. So yeah, despite having such a massive warband and all of these advantages, it's still very close. So what's that telling me? I think that the meta that we're in is fine, actually. There is a tendency to have smaller warbands, bigger smashy fighters, pushing out that mid-range contingency of fighters, and really doubling down on just raw stats and raw damage. Now, the natural counter to that is swarms and very big warbands, because they're going to have so many activations over these warbands that it's just a huge advantage, right? Combine that with this mission pack, where yes, I managed to win, but the margins of victory weren't so huge that it was just like, oh, is the missions carrying you or is the swarm carrying you? I think we're doing all right, actually. It is worth noting that this is one of the most stressful warbands I've ever had to play. The idea is that turns 1 and 2 is when you have to score all of your points, and then turns 3 and 4 is basically damage limitation. Your guys will die, and they will die extremely quickly. And if you cannot keep on top of the amount of fighters dying versus the amount of fighters being resurrected, and fighters will die because you have to push them into opponent fighters to tie them up and to do different things, then you're basically going to have a really hard time. You're kind of trying to play your opponent's game and play your game at the same time. So it's very difficult. It's very stressful. But if that's a kind of playstyle that you want, try out one of these really large warbands. It might be fun for you. And it's going to take some time to get used to, but once it clicks, I find it very rewarding. Second place, we had Andy Morris. He was bringing Skaven. This is kind of an example of these Skaven lists that have been cropping up recently after the September update. A pair of Rat Ogres, a bunch of Packmasters, probably Skabic in there because Skabic still is the best Skaven hero that they have. He's put something interesting in here. He's put in Creep Kin Whisper. Creep is pretty good. I like Creep. He's got a shooting attack. He's got a very good triple, which is kind of like the Witherlord's ability. So you're going to be rolling a bunch of dice over your opponent's toughness, and you're going to do 3 damage for each one of those that passes. So that's pretty nice. He's got the Warpfire gun in there. So the Warpfire gun, if he uses the Rat Ogre ability to get free actions off, the Warpfire gun, because it gets to stay back, it's basically a free attack action for the first 1, maybe 2 rounds of the game. Once Rat Ogres do start to take damage, that damage will start piling up when they use their own ability on them, which is kind of why you want the Warpfire gun in there. He did say, I was chatting to him after the game, that the numbers are a bit weird on the Warpfire gun because it's only 2 shots and it's 3/6 damage. You need it to be hitting like 3 out of 4 dice, or like 4 or 5 out of 6 dice. Then it starts to pull its weight. But if it doesn't do that, then suddenly it's kind of doing a whole lot of nothing for 230 points. I don't know if we are going to see double fighty Rat Ogres, or if we're going to see people double down on Warpfire guns. I really like the Warpfire gun. I think it's a very strong shooting piece. So that's something interesting that we will see going forward. He does have the Clan Rats with Rusty Blades. He does have Skritter in there, and he does have a Packmaster. The important thing is that they all fall in at 70 points or less. You get to use the Skaven battle trait to do resurrect tricks with them. This is very strong on the objective missions, where you get to push things into your opponents. They die, they come back, they go get objectives, they can do their thing. On the kill missions, because of the nature of how their resurrect works, and you scoring points at the end of the turn, it's not like a Knight of War or a Soulblight resurrect where you can negate that point scoring. You take the points for it, so you have to play a little bit more cagey if you're doing that. Third place, we have Ross. Ross took Reclusians in the new Ruination Chamber, but it's not just Reclusians, it's mainly Hexbane, Bridget, Quiet Pock, Amos Duncarrow, Rat Spike. So all of those guys, but using a Lord Veritant to be able to turn off abilities. A Knight Arcanum, simply because it's got a decent shooting attack. I don't know if he gave it the bonus strength. I don't think he did. What I like to do on my Knight Arcanums is that I like to boost the strength of that shooting attack to strength 5, so suddenly it's winning on 3s. Very much like the Rat Ogre with Warp Fire Gun. The Knight Arcanum also has a very good double bolt from the heavens, where you get to pick a guy at 18 inches, roll a bunch of dice, and do a whole bunch of damage to that fighter. I can see why you would bring a Knight Arcanum. I think it's a pretty nice choice, and it seemed to do well for him in this case. We are bringing one Griff Crow because that combos with the Lord Veritant to have board wide all of your abilities turn into 1s. So that's very good. And then we're bringing Hexbane's Hunters to fill out the numbers. The real stars of the show here are, of course, Quiet Pock with the +1 strength. Can do a whole bunch of damage, as damaging as the Knight Arcanum. And Hexbane himself, he can run into things. He can use his triple to boost his crit value. He's just an all-round good, solid fighter. It's got a nice mix of numbers because you get access to the Griff Crow, you get access to Rat Spike. Bridget Axwold isn't bad either. So yeah, it's a nice list. I can see why it did well. There are a couple of pieces in there that could make things fall apart kind of quickly. If you face something that can go out there and snipe that Quiet Pock early, suddenly there might be problems. So I think that's something to watch out for, especially considering that you only have 2 sources of the Reclusian reaction in the Lord Veritant and the Griff Crow, and they come on together. So if the dagger is caught out somewhere, maybe there's a possibility that Pock could die. Going on to the additional 3-1s, you got Jamie. I played him in my 3rd round. A very similar Skaven list to Andy's. You got the double Rat Ogres, one of them with a Warfire Gun, a whole bunch of Pack Masters, Skabic Plagueseeker, and Creedkin Whisper. It's a very good list. Like I said, the only real reason that I lost to this list is because Skabic decided to walk in another direction and not towards where the fight was going to be on turns 3 and 4. It wasn't a terrible idea at the time. I had a whole bunch of fighters on one side of the battlefield, so you thought, okay, Skabic's going to tie them up, stop me from getting objectives. But in reality, if Skabic was in there and he was fighting, he would have minced through spiders very easily. But yeah, it's a very good list. Jamie's a very good player. There were only 2 Skaven players at this event, Jamie and Andy. I think it's no coincidence that the 2 lists were very similar. I think it's a template for what could possibly be one of the best Skaven lists. I've got another thing in mind that leans very heavily into Resurrect. I hope to take that in March. But yeah, there's no denying that in a format where you have these big smashy fighters, Rat Ogres, who are big smashy fighters, that also get free actions off by themselves and more free actions off from Pack Masters, they can be extremely strong. That's something to look out for in the future. If you're going to an event, this is probably a template for one of the best Skaven lists. Anthony, I also played Anthony. I played Anthony in my final round. Anthony's your lane, by the way. We have a good chat with him, again, in that video that I was talking about. He also brought Reclusians, but he brought a very different style, and this was impressive. He's basically taken 4 Reclusians, one of them being a Prime, and then 4 Griff Crows. He's got an 8-man warband, so it's fairly large. Reclusians themselves, they hit hard. Yeah, they're only strength 4, but they're 4 attacks, doing a 3-5, I think it is. But you don't want to fight into them. And he's got the Prime with Savagery, so that thing's swinging at 3-6, but with strength 5. So the Reclusians, they hit as hard as Annihilators. They've got all sorts of additional tech going on. They're far more tanky than Annihilators are, and they are faster, which is the important thing. On a double, they get a whole bunch of extra strength, and they get bonus movement, so they can get in there and do their thing. The real scary thing about this warband, though, is actually those Griff Crows. Because the Griff Crows get to use the Reclusian reaction to effectively turn off abilities, and it's a much larger warband, what he gets to do is move around and do his stuff. He can kind of wait out your opponents, and then he gets to turn off key abilities off your opponent, because normally they'll be sitting at 8 or less fighters. And even if he's just going evens with them on numbers, that means, on average, he will have spare Griff Crows to be able to turn off abilities. The only reason I managed to get around this is because my warband is so large, So I can outweight his entire warband and then use my key abilities after all of his grid periods are activated. That's what gave me the advantage here. But you can see it. He went 3-1. And I can imagine against his other opponents, suddenly they have to be thinking about, okay, it's not about making doubles, triples, and quads anymore. It's about making high doubles, triples, and quads. Because if you make like a double 3, for example, or a 3 or more, a Grifka is turning off that ability. The worst thing, you make your quad and it's like a low quad, a quad 1, it's guaranteed to turn that off. So I think this is a very interesting way to play Reclusians. It's a bit slower, it's a bit more methodical, it's a bit more control-oriented, but it's very powerful, and I can see how it did really well. 6th place, Edward Tyson. I played him in my first game. This is Triple Shrike Talon, Corvus Cabal. Toast, I know you're watching this. I know you're listening to this. Well done. He played against Charles. He played against Demetrios. He did not play against Toast, which is kind of funny considering that Toast has been championing this warband for ages. Let's look at the warband itself. We have the Shadow Piercer, which is the leader, Triple Shrike Talon. They all have Savagery to go up to crit 5, and then a bunch of Kabbalists, either with spears or just normal flavors of Kabbalist. So why does this work? The reason it works is because Corvus Cabal got their battle trait back in September and the Briar and Bone book. That battle trait basically says if they end a move action more than 2 inches from where they started vertically, they're going to get a +2 strength. So suddenly their strength 4 strike talons go to strength 6, and if they are strength 6, they're going to start ripping through things. Even though they're only a 2-4 damage profile, or 2-5 in this case, that suddenly makes them pretty good. What else makes them good? They basically have Rampage on a triple, and if they jump off of the thing, they get to make a free attack action. So generally what they're going to be doing is they're going to be using a move action to get up onto a thing, and then they're going to be using their triple for Rampage. They're going to be jumping off, get a free attack action at strength 6, and then they're going to be doing another attack action at strength 6. You're basically going to be running on 3s all the time, and when you're chucking up that many dice, the damage is there, and most of it is going to stick. This was a very smart list to bring to Warhammer World, I think. We know that Warhammer World like to do terrain dense. It's like 1.5 boxes or so of Warcry scenery. So that means that there are a lot of things like bridges, a lot of platforms, a lot of walls to climb up on. So you get a lot of opportunity to use that Corvus Cabal triple and use it very well. Okay, let's take 7th and 9th place together. Untamed Beasts, one piloted by Toast, the other one piloted by David. So, Untamed Beasts have some interesting things going for them. They have the Heart Eater, who is legitimately a good hero. He's 200 points, 5525 damage profile. Toast boosted him with +1 base damage to make him 3-5. David boosted him with +1 toughness to make him toughness 5. So that gives them either a lot more resilience or a ton of damage off the gate. Then they all had that first Fang in there. The good thing about the first Fang is that it's got the Harpoon, and the Harpoon is one of the very few pulls in the game. You get to make a bonus attack action, and then the target moves directly towards the fighter a number of inches equal to the ability. They have that ranged attack, so it's a 2-5-2-5, so it's going to be winning on 3s and doing a little bit of damage. You're going to be able to get the triple for that free attack action off, and then pull things closer to either your Heart Eater or the first Fang itself. If they're close enough, then the first Fang can swing with strength 5 and 2-4. So that's pretty good. How did Adam capitalize on that pull? He combined it with Vexmore, because if Vexmore doesn't have to move to get places, it can start swinging and do a lot more damage. That was very smart on his part. You do see a lot of Chaos players using Vexmore with some kind of a pull. Sometimes they are using Apitrax to Starefish. Sometimes they are using Beastman Wizards. Sometimes they're using Slaughter Priests. The idea is that if Vexmore doesn't have to move, he can swing. Then Adam decided to take a Trueblood. The Trueblood obviously has the perfect net. You don't have to roll dice for it. It's only on a double. So that's a very smart counter to some of these big things that we've been seeing. Something like a Rat Ogre, Ephemeroid Crusher, other Vexmores, for example. If you run a Trueblood in there, throw a double at it, it's not moving and basically neutralized for that turn. If you get activation advantage and priority when you do this, all the better. It's a very easy and quick way to take out one of those big fighters without actually having to kill it. He decided to give it a +1 movement, so it goes up to movement 5. Suddenly, you've got a 10-inch move where anything within 13 inches of the starting position of that True Blood, you can just turn it off and you can say, no, you're not moving, you're done. You've got Plains Runners who are movement 5. He took a Prey Taker with Sawtooth Blade, is just a generic good 100-point fighter. He decided to give it wounds, so it goes up to 14 wounds to give it a bit more survivability. David, on the other hand, he decided to go all in with that toughness bonus. He got the dog with a toughness bonus. He has the toughness on First Fang, 2 First Fangs, in fact, on top of that toughness on the Heart Eater. So he's counting on that to be able to stretch out his survivability long enough that the natural damage of the Warband can actually do what they need to. He does have 2 pulls off of 2 First Fangs, which means in objective missions he can do things like pull people off of objectives if he's placed in the right way, and his triples are high enough to just pull them off. So that's pretty smart. The dog is fine. It's a 4-4-2-5, 195 points. It is 20 wounds. The thing is swinging harder than most bespoke leaders, which is kind of funny. And if you give it toughness 5, it's this 8-inch range. I'm going to run into an entire deployment zone of chaff. I will tank all the hits. I'll start chewing through those chaff models. You're going to have a hard time getting rid of me because you're going to be winning me on 5s, and I've got 20 wins. So I like it. There are a lot of lists that I've been writing recently with fast, kind of tough, bulky cavalry, and the Rocktusk Prowler manages to fill that role admirably for Untamed Beasts. The nice thing about David's list is that it was pure Untamed Beasts. So you can either do it Adam's way, where you're going to bring in the allies, or you can do it David's way, where you go pure, and as long as you build smart or correctly, Untamed Beasts can do pretty well. Finally, we have Sam, who came in 8th place. He also brought Reclusians. He's got the Lord Terminos with Savagery to make it hit very, very hard. 3 Reclusians, so kind of like the previous list we saw in the amount of Reclusians he's taken. A pair of Griff Crows, so we're not going as big as the previous list, but you still have those 2 Griff Crows in there as something a little bit faster and also to perform disruption with their reactions. And finally, he decided to take an Errant Questor with Grandblade. I know Charles also took Reclusians. He decided to bring Calthea in very much the same, like a similar idea to get extra attack actions off and movement actions off with Calthea. The Errant Questor is not going to be doing attack actions, but on a double it can pick a guy and he'll get a free move. So that's exactly why it's here. It's a 7-man warband and not an 8-man warband that we saw before. I can still definitely see how it does well, much in the similar way that old Thunderstrike lists used to do pretty well with the Annihilators. Reclusians are just as tough and just as killy as Annihilators. And then you've got the Lord Terminos that you just don't want to touch because he will kill you. I'm very happy that we are seeing Reclusians and the Ruination Chamber being represented, and I'm very happy that they're doing pretty well. I think these kind of mid to larger warbands with Reclusians is the way that you need to go. So if you do want to play them at home, you're gonna need multiple Griff Crows. You're probably going to be looking at 3, maybe 4 basic Reclusians plus a character. It might be a bit boring in terms of composition, where it's a bit samey. You've just got a bunch of Reclusians and then you've got a bunch of Crows, but there's no doubt that it isn't effective. It's good to see that people are looking at them, and it's good to see that people are doing well. Right, that's it. That is all of the 3-in-1s. Like I said, if you want to see all of the lists, check out the link down below. Go to my blog, to my website. I will list out all of the lists from the event. You will be able to see how they did. Thank you very much for watching. That was Warhammer World and the Tangled Gnarlwood 2. We will see you next time for more event breakdowns.